Hello listeners, Jordan here. I just want to let you know that you can listen to Nighttime early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Include it with Prime.
You are listening to the Nighttime Podcast.
Hello listeners. This episode is going to be the first in a multi-part series titled Justice for Sia Van Wyck. This series is going to explore the circumstances related to the death of then 7-year-old Sia Van Wyck, who died a horrific and tragic death while visiting Nova Scotia in the summer of 2017. But before we get to Sia's story, I want to tell you about and play you some audio from a video filmed just a few hundred feet from the area Sia was killed. This video was filmed a few years after her death and, at least officially, is unrelated and completely separate from the tragedy that ended Sia's only 7 years of life. The video shows a small group of people, probably a family, on the porch of their home. As the video starts, a backhoe can be seen driving out what appears to be the gravel driveway to the home. As the tractor approaches the group, the older man in the cab is screaming profanities, seemingly making threats to the group, and shouting something about a property line. But this isn't what I'd call an argument. As the tractor jerks back and forth and positions itself on what appears to be the backyard of the house, the man begins to dig up their yard, dangerously close to this horrified group.
I own this fucking right away and I own the property here. So fuck around. Fuck with me.
He has not been anywhere near your property. And I don't care. Give me the phone. I want the RCMP number. Right there. I want the RCMP number.
He looks. No, call 911. Tell him you have a crazy drunk old man running around with a backhoe around kids.
Now I want you to put that clip in the back of your mind. In my opinion, it becomes very important as we go along. But for now, let's forget about the man in the tractor and get back to 7-year-old Sia Van Wyck. As I was about to get to, Sia's death was ruled an unfortunate farming accident and was not believed to be criminal in nature, at least by the RCMP investigators. However, her family, their many supporters, and their highly respected private investigator believed the case was fundamentally flawed from the start, and had a properly performed investigation occurred, the man responsible for Sia's death would not be free to terrorize his neighbors with a tractor. Now, to get to this series. As I mentioned from the top, this is going to be the first episode in a multi-part series that explores this case. We're going to hear from a variety of people who are involved in a variety of ways. But I want to start this series close to home. I'm going to start by speaking with Sia's understandably devastated mother, Effie. As you will soon hear, Effie was back home in the United States when Sia and her dad Eric came to Nova Scotia to visit family. In this episode, Effie will join us and tell us about her daughter Sia, and in heartbreaking detail, she'll describe her desperate race from the United States to Nova Scotia after learning a horrific incident had her beloved daughter clinging to life in a hospital she never heard of.
7-year-old Sia Van Wyck was full of life and adventure. She was playing in a neighbor's hayfield in Clementsville near Digby on July 19th when she was struck by a piece of farm machinery. Sia died hours later from her injuries.
So Effie, we'll start present day. So maybe just to give us an idea of who you are and what your life is like. Tell me a bit about you now in 2022. What is your life like?
I am a mom living in Maine, a mom to Sia and Nico. My surviving child is now 10 years old, and I work full-time in clinical research and just keep busy with keeping my son's activities and sports, and also still a mom to 2 children. And so both of those children require different things from their mom. Mm-hmm. And Sia, I try to balance the fight for bringing her killer to justice with supporting all of the things that she loved and the things that we've done and friends have done to honor her memory. Mm-hmm. And, whether that's a, garden at her elementary school or a nonprofit in India that feeds children breakfast in her honor, taking care of her favorite person in the world, her brother, and her pets, and staying close to her friends.
What is the age difference between Sia and Nico?
They were just under a year and a half.
Nico being the younger brother.
Younger, yeah, sorry. Yeah, Nico was the younger. So Sia was just under a year and a half older. And Nico was always really tall for his age, and Sia was petite. And so they were essentially the same size. Oh. And she would always take offense that she didn't understand why people would think they were twins when she was clearly older.
And we've planned to do this talk today at a time that Nico wouldn't be around to overhear it. That must be very difficult to continue to look after him and keep him away from, I guess, the tragedy that is hanging over the family. How is he dealing with your focus, a lot of it being taken away with this tragedy and just with the loss of his sister? Like that must... I can't imagine how someone his age would be dealing with this.
Yeah, he desperately misses his sister, and they were two peas in a pod, and we very much keep Sia's memory and her presence present. We talk about her constantly, we include her in conversations. Her friends still come over, play in her room. Sia is a daily conversation. So, we talk about, what sports do you think she would play? And do you think she'd like this movie? And so he very much incorporates her into daily conversation. We carry Sia with us in our present and always will.
A lot of the story that we're going to get into is set in Nova Scotia, but as you said, your family and Sia, you're all from, she was born and raised in Maine, is that right?
They're born in California. Okay. They were both born in California. Mm-hmm.
And then your family relocated to Maine?
Yes. We relocated to Maine in 2015, and then this happened in 2017. Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk a bit about Sia. So, what was Sia's life like? What was her personality? What were her hobbies and interests? Tell me about her.
She loved life here. So we moved from Los Angeles and moved to Maine, where we had a yard, mm-hmm. And so all of these things, like she was, she just loved nature, loved animals, like a lot of kids. And I remember, when the first spring, we moved here in the winter, and so she had never seen snowfall. Oh, wow. And had never even put on winter boots before. And so all of it was fascinating. Mm-hmm. And
for a 5-year-old, it'd be so magical.
Oh yeah. I have a video of her seeing her first snowfall, and she went absolutely berserk. And, so in California, the preschool had fake snow, which I'm guessing is from movie sets or something, fake snow in the preschool that they could sled in, but it's winter. I mean, it's warm in California. And so she absolutely loved it. And I remember in the spring, daisies grew all over the yard and weeds, and she was like, "Can I pick these?" And I said, "Yeah." And so I have a picture of her. She went and just ripped them all up from the roots and was hugging them, and I said, with just dirt everywhere. And she loved that there were just critters, again, being Maine, and there's woods all around the yard, that there's frogs and mice and slugs, and she would make habitats for everything. And so I never, my Tupperware drawer was always empty, because she would take Tupperwares and put them outside, and have put signs on them and give everybody names and create, and
So it sounds like a lot of laundry at your house.
yeah, yes. And then through the woods or through our a path, then there's two houses where her best friends lived. So she, the kids were always back and forth, and yeah, she was very happy here, and like I said, loved the just having a yard with
Nature at her
animals.
doorstep, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, let's get to summer of 2017 when we find our way to Nova Scotia.
Mhm.
Again, you're in Maine. She's 7 years old. You're living in Maine, but I believe it's Sia and her father Eric that come
Yeah.
to Nova Scotia for. And was it the idea they would come for the whole summer, or what was like the
No,
purpose of
God,
them
no,
coming?
no. Three
No,
nights.
3 nights. Oh, so this is just a
Yeah,
quick.
it was
I've
supposed to be.
heard it described as a summer vacation, so I wasn't sure if you meant
Oh,
like
no,
summer
no,
camp.
no.
It was
God,
just
no,
okay.
no. This was, so his relationship with his mother was often estranged, and they did
This
not have
and
a
this
good.
is Sia's father Eric's relationship with his
So
mom,
yes,
Sia's grandmother.
with his mother, so
Mhm.
their grandmother.
Yeah.
And so they didn't know her well. They knew sort of her, but they had not spent much time with her. And after moving to California, or sorry, after moving from California to Maine, they sort of reconnected,
Mhm.
and so Eric's mother and stepfather came down to visit around Christmas time, and then came down to visit again in the spring. And this is the first time that we had seen them in years. And like I said, the relationship was often very distant,
Mhm.
and they were not really part of the kids' lives.
Mhm.
And so then summertime came, and I don't know how the conversation happened. Eric would have to fill that part in of between he and his mother about why don't you come up. But the decision was made, and that, what if I go visit, um, my mother's farm for a few days, and, and it sounded like it was this, utopia, idyllic farm life
Mhm.
that Sia would have such a great time. And it'd be like, a little father-daughter trip for just, again, it was just a few nights,
And it was
and
just the two of them that were
just the two
becoming.
of them.
Yeah, just to,
And
knowing how family works. I have young kids myself. If I was in that situation, I would maybe bring one of my kids, even just to soften kind of the weird
right.
vibes of
Yeah.
family. But in hearing you describe Sia, it sounds like a trip to a farm to see animals and have fields to run. Like
All
that would
right.
be, it would make complete sense to bring her along.
Right. And, Eric is a very hands-on dad,
Mhm.
so he's, you know, always taking the kids on adventures. And, um, and we've traveled with Sia, we had gone to Greece, we'd gone to, different islands and things with her. And so, and I'd flown back and forth when we lived in California to the East Coast all the time with the kids, to see family on my own. And um, so I was very nervous, and actually, just to let her go on our own, but only because, you worry as a
Yeah.
parent. And at that point, there were no intrinsic reasons to be fearful other than distance and travel. And um, and so because the mother had not had much contact with the kids, and Eric and I talked about, don't leave Sia alone with them. I talked to the mother about um, keeping an eye on Sia, don't let her out of your sight, and sort of all the things that you would say.
Mhm.
And just felt like, okay, she's got three adults around her. I was actually, once they arrived, because it was such a long car ride and then a ferry trip, I was more at ease once they arrived, and thought like, okay, so that the danger of the trip
Mhm.
was, I'm not, as concerned.
And as this is happening, as they're down in Nova Scotia, it's you and your son are home in Maine.
Right.
When Sia arrives with her father Eric at the home, I'm assuming there was like a phone call where you're able to touch base and see how she's making out. Do you recall any kind of conversations from you to them in Nova Scotia to touch base with her?
So I know that Eric and I had would have been in constant contact with texting, and I know he sent pictures of her on the ferry and all along the way of like she's doing great. And we would have she left, when they were leaving, Sia was still asleep, so I carried her asleep out of her bed and put her in the car. And so she woke up at some point on the trip, and I think I'd packed the cooler for them, and so I think he'd texted when they had stopped and she'd woken up, and we're having the snack of whatever I packed. And then on the ferry ride, he said she's loving the ferry and sent a picture of her on the ferry. I don't recall the call of when they arrived there, but I'm sure there must have been one. And
but you at least remember a time that learning that they arrived and you knew
absolutely.
that they were safe.
And so at no point was I was we were in contact the whole time. And then that morning, so she arrived on the 18th, and July 18th, and so she left on the 18th and they arrived that day. She was hit on the 19th. Mm-hmm. And so then I talked to her the morning of the 19th, and she was really excited. They were going to go visit a farm, and I didn't want to keep her, so we kept it short. And then the next communication, I saved a baby mouse from drowning in the pool, and I sent the picture of it with the mouse and a strawberry and the Tupperware, like she would do, sent it to Eric, like show Sia. Then later that day, I can't remember if Eric and I spoke or it was by text, and he said that he was telling me about they went swimming, and they had taken this dog, the mother's dog, on a walk, and how great she's doing and she's having fun. Okay. And
so it sounds like going according to plan and what you would have expected.
Going according to plan.
Just to touch on the dog, is the dog that you're referring to is Eric's mom's dog that was at the house. So, and you described Sia as loving critters and such. So I'm sure she would take to a dog pretty quickly. Right?
Absolutely, she loved it. She was, just before she went up, she was at animal shelter camp. Oh. And it's she just absolutely loved animals, and so she would be thrilled to be with a new dog. Yeah.
So you just described her arriving on the 18th. You have some conversations on the 19th, and it seems like they had a busy day of swimming, maybe going to see a farm. Mm-hmm. Now tell me, how you in Maine, how do you learn that something had happened? I'm assuming this happens, you find out on the 19th. How do you learn something's happening?
So I drove Nico home, and that day, like I said, he got to choose his fun activity, and it was water balloons, water guns. And so we come home, and like I said, I had just communicated with Eric, and Nico was in the bathroom filling up his water gun, and the house phone rang, and I answered, and it was Eric screaming, and he just kept screaming my name over and over. And then I started screaming back, not knowing what we were screaming about. And Nico ran out with his water gun, like up, like he needed to, like something bad was happening, like he was going to protect something, and had his water gun up. And Eric, like I said, so he just kept screaming Effie, and I said, oh my God. And what happened? And I don't recall his words, but he said they found her leg. And I said, what do you mean they found her leg? And I just started screaming, is she alive? And he was saying, I don't know. And I like I said, all of that was a blur. Um, I know just from communication with other people that I thought she was hit by a car. Um, I don't recall what it was, what words that Eric used. Um, I don't know that he even knew what happened.
But you know something horrible has happened,
Yeah,
and Sia is either clinging to life or worse.
yeah,
You're miles away in the United States.
yeah.
What is your like? How what do you do this night when this happens? Because you're home with your child.
Again, like I don't remember all the details. Like I just remember, that saying, hearing they're taking her, she'll go to IWK, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what that means.
Mm-hmm.
The neighbors came over. How they put it all together, I don't know.
Wow.
They helped me find a passport. My other neighbor got her passport. One neighbor just got Nico, and we got in the car.
Wow.
And she just started driving. No one packed, no one paused. We just started driving.
And this neighbor, you would have only been living there a year or two at the time. Is this
Yeah.
someone that you were close with, I'm assuming?
Yeah, so we were close with the kids, were all best friends. And
Okay.
it was, so even though it was a short amount of time, we became, close friends very quickly, and remained so.
Mm-hmm.
And
Do you remember like the drive to Nova Scotia? I'm sure you were in complete shock and,
yeah,
and just do you remember anything about the drive?
so yeah, I do. I remember, again, so we were trying to get, so my different family members were trying different things, like, so like talking to the border of saying like, just let them through. They're going to be coming, so that there's no delay at the border.
Yeah.
Um, and they were trying to get me a life flight. So basically a flight to go up. And so my neighbor pulled me into a small airport that was north of here. And we sat there for, I think it was at least an hour and a half or more, waiting for this plane to come in. And then they landed, and we were ready to go. And then they said that because of fog, they can't land in Halifax. So
Okay.
I'd lost all those hours, and then had to get back in the car and just keep going. And
And as this is happening, either you or the people around you know this is time is of the essence.
absolutely.
Mm.
And so then Eric is, I don't even know if it was texting and calling, but they said all along, that they took a helicopter. And then they were, when she was going into surgery, and he had me keep recording my voice to play in her ear to let her know I was coming. And yeah, I think it was like from phone call to arrival. I mean, I don't know if it was 12 hours. I think it was about 12 hours.
In I know that when you learned what would be hazy, but as you're on your way during this 12-ish hours of commuting, do you remember learning details of what happened, or was it still you were getting there
No,
knowing something horrible?
just something horrible.
Mm.
And yeah, there was no mention of, or even talk or question of like who or how or
Yeah,
why.
it was just getting
Um,
there.
it was just getting there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you get to Nova Scotia, I'm assuming for your first time ever being here, you rushed to the IWK?
Yeah. So I had been there. I had visited, when was it? So I'd been there before,
Mm.
I think once or twice before. Um, but yeah, so my neighbor drove me to IWK, and the security person helped me find Sia.
Okay. I don't want to ask anything too uncomfortable, but when you arrive to the IWK, were you able to see her, and was she still like? Were you able to like? What happened?
She was still alive, but she was, I think, sedated at that point, and she had lost a leg and mostly, her arm. The wounds were it's indescribable.
There were, as we've already gotten into, there would have been so much shock that what happened is a blur. But do you recall being involved in like the follow-ups with doctors, like a fighting for her life sort of thing, or what do you remember about being in the IWK as they were trying to save Sia?
I Again, like I said, it all seems like minutes, but I think we were, I was there for, into the night. And I recall sitting with the doctor who said when he left the night before that he gave her barely a 10% chance to survive, in the fact that she survived the night, that because she had no damage to her internal organs or nervous system. And so it seemed like she would survive.
So you were there was a point where you were hopeful.
Absolutely. And hopeful, not just as her mom, but it seemed that even the doctor seemed to think that she was stabilizing, and in that she would survive. And yeah.
When does it turn? When does it take a turn that
it seemed to happen so fast that we were just with her, and then all of a sudden they started doing CPR. I recall the doctor saying 13 minutes, and I think those were the minutes that he said. And I said, "What do you mean 13 minutes?" I said, "And even though you're seeing what you're seeing in front of you, none of it seems like I couldn't comprehend it." And Eric and I were both just screaming for her.
What would 13 minutes? What did that?
I don't know if that meant CPR for 13 minutes.
You just remember hearing that.
It might have been a different teen minute, but in my mind, I recall a minute in the teens. Mm-hmm. And so, like I said, in my mind, it's 13. That might not be right, but yeah, it was. And then suddenly the whole space filled up with people just watching. And, so the nurses were doing CPR and working really hard, clearly to save her. And like I said, but then there's all these other people. I remember there were two nurses who were behind me laughing. They were talking and they were laughing. And I turned around and screamed at them, "She's 7 years old. What are you laughing about?" And then all of a sudden it just like went quiet. And that nurse like pulled my shoulder back. She's like, "We were laughing about something else." I remember just trying to get close to her. And she had like all the wires and tubes and things, and they said that it's illegal to, I don't know if they said it's illegal to remove anything or illegal to touch her. And I said, "Then arrest me." And I was just trying to crawl into the bed with her. And the nurse, that doctor, was still standing there. I could see his feet through the screen, the curtain. And she said to arrest her. And the doctor just walked away. And so then the nurses came in, and those ones were very nice. And they started unhooking what they could. And they wrapped us in a blanket together, a warm blanket, and let me lay with her. And they let us lay there as long as we wanted.
So sorry.
And the thing is, to some degree, it's like people think like said like your child just like evaporates into heaven, and what he did to her was unspeakable. agony and pain. She died a violent and painful death, alone in a field.
The idea of a death happening outside of your country, that must have really made this, even added another layer of trauma to all of this. How do you deal with that?
So my friend, who is an amazing woman. She's family. She's, even though she's a friend, she's like family. And she was in the delivery room when Sia was born. And I texted that, that this had happened. I don't know what I said, but so then she just got on a plane and flew out and was in the room with us before we had to say goodbye to Sia. And she got us hotel rooms, and my family was helping with, because then you have to deal with the American consulate, you have to deal with a funeral home there, you have to deal with getting Sia home. And so those days we were in a hotel room for days, just dealing with the logistics of getting her home.
Wow. And presumably, though, at this point is when you're starting to learn, how did this happen to Sia? Because I can imagine getting down there in the hospital. It's nothing matters except keeping her, like saving her life. But at this point, there must be some like, what the hell happened?
There's still a little of what happened, and I was believing what Eric was told as well. So it's not even just what he's telling me, it's what he was told because he didn't see it. Mm-hmm. Was that I think the term at that point was a combine. And I remember saying, what's a combine? I don't know for a fact, but I think, listen, at that point, I'm still believing she was in a field. And so I think at this point, I've learned that it's not a car, that it wasn't just hit by a car. But again, I still don't recall those conversations.
Wow.
I think at that point I was told, she was run over by this neighbor. And I say that only because that's what, for months was my understanding. And then in talking to the RCMP, that's what I was told. And
at least from the beginning, though, what you were told and what was relayed to you seemed to suggest an accident involving a vehicle, whether a car or whatever the heck a combine is, which we now know a combine is a type of tractor.
Right.
So you go through the issues with the consulate and whatnot. You're staying at the hotel. How long are you here before you're able to get Sia back to the United States? And here being Nova Scotia.
I honestly, I think it was 3 days or so. I'm not positive. And I flew home with her, and
just a regular airplane, like you go to the airport?
A regular airplane, like a regular commercial airplane.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we flew her home, and and then we moved forward with services after that.
Mm-hmm. A funeral for a 7-year-old just seems like that is a phrase that should not even exist. Yeah. And the idea of having one, other children, like her friends attending, my mind fails to comprehend what that would be like. Were you involved in the planning of the funeral? And
I mean, I know that I was there. I don't recall really making any decisions. My family.
Yeah, who took it on? Like, because I'm guessing or Eric, Sia's dad, would be.
I don't know that he remembers more, but my cousins and siblings basically the family arranged everything.
Wow.
And but yeah, the little cousins and her little friends and teachers and um, town police, they were all there, and I can't imagine what it would have been like for her, for the children to see her.
This. You had mentioned at the beginning of our talk that something you dedicate a lot of time to now is celebrating her life and in memory by way of things like having a garden, I think you said, at her school.
Yeah.
When did, like, considering like the time that her funeral happened, when was it that you started to, you kind of like partner up with the school and these other places to do things for Sia?
I have to, I can't take, credit for thinking of doing anything other than, again, the things that you do in your own life and with your church and at home. The school initiated it.
Oh, that's amazing.
And so I thought, when they said, we want to do something for Sia, I thought, maybe it's going to be a little fairy house that they put like in the corner, and then it's just going to be in her memory. But the whole town, the school, and the whole town donated, landscaping services, excavation services, and planting, and parents of children donated all the plants, and they created this gorgeous garden. And there's a picture of her in the school, and it's Sia's garden. And it's played with every day and at the elementary school, and it's a beautiful little space. And she loved her school, and she had only made it through first grade, and but she absolutely loved it and was so proud of knowing her teachers and her relationships with her teachers and friends. And she was learning to play the violin, and she was just starting her little life, and it was just remarkable to see, she was growing out of being a baby into a kid with her own stories of what she did during the day. She absolutely loved that school. She was really so excited by it. And, so I'm so grateful that this school keeps her memory so present, and really thankful for that.
Now, after all of this happens, her death, you come home, you have the funeral. There's going to be a time when you're able to now pay attention and focus on, what happened, what led to this. And I know a lot has changed since you would have initially heard what happened, but what was kind of the first full version of the story that you got as to what led to Sia's death? And I'm assuming this would have come from like RCMP that investigated it. Is likely where you would have first got the first version.
Yeah. So the first version, again, which is an inaccurate version.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a text. I think it was, let me see. I actually still have the texts.
Wow. Would this have been a text from like an officer?
So this was Terry Miller. Terry Miller, who was the lead detective. And on the 27th, July 27th, he texted me and introduced himself and gave me his cell number and said to call at my convenience with any questions. I know we started speaking, would call him over and over, and unfortunately those were all over the phone. It wasn't by text, so I don't have the details of the conversations, but I do recall calling him over and over, essentially asking the same questions over and over because none of it added up. Mm-hmm. And he told me that, and so he told me so our last communication was in October. So between August and October, he told me that the case was closed. Um, he told me that Sia was hiding in tall grass, that he described, I said, whatever words he used in my mind, because I had never been there, I'm picturing like a cornfield, a sunflower field, like
Mhm.
something.
The same images in my head as well.
Yeah, because he said that I do remember this clear, that he said there's no way she could have seen him, in no way he could have seen her. And so I'm thinking, like, so in my mind, it had to have been, something like you would do like a corn maze, like that kind of
Mhm.
thing, like where it would be so thick that she couldn't be seen. And that seemed plausible to me in my mind, that if she really did go into this dense, essentially a cornfield,
Mhm.
and couldn't find her way out, and he couldn't, like I said, so what was being described to me was, like I said, this dense, thick, tall grass. She couldn't be seen. He couldn't see her. It was misadventure by a child, that she could have only been outside for a few minutes at most. And I said, well, is there any way that he could have been drunk or high, or and he said, oh, no, 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 I vividly remember this, that he said there's no way, there was no indication that he would have been drinking, and there are no charges to be filed. It was an absolute accident.
Yeah, and what it was this man that they say wasn't drunk or high or whatever, was mowing the field with a combine tractor, like a
Yeah.
large piece of farming equipment to cut whatever grass
Yes.
you're imagining in your head to be tall grass. But
Yes.
and this man, again, you're not from Nova Scotia, you don't know Eric's family well. What did you know initially about who this man was, and like what field this was? Like what
So
was?
I know that the parents called him Snooky, and that this was a neighbor that at least knew enough to
Mm,
know him by a nickname.
nickname? Yeah.
And that my understanding was that, I don't know if I was told or if I read this later, that Eric's mother then went to Potter and was saying that it was not his fault. And
Potter is Snooky.
yes,
Yeah.
and so I don't know much more than that about what their relationship
Yeah.
was.
But you do learn that there's a man named Snooky or Potter that was driving the tractor in the field that Sia was killed in, was his field that he was plowing.
Right. And like I said, I don't know that I knew the specifics of
Mhm.
whose field or any of that
Yeah.
for a long time.
Mhm.
Um,
So initially, at this point, you were 3 or 4 months out from it actually happening. You're still learning just the basic details from the
yeah.
RCMP, but I guess it makes sense because you're dealing with so much on top of that you wouldn't be sitting down and organizing files
No, I
and
said
finding
you
minutia.
can't even think straight. Like I said, there's no way to describe the absolute searing agony,
Hmm.
agony that it is. And like I said, in it, you still have a 5-year-old who's
Hmm.
grieving his sister, and you need to send to school in a few weeks. He's starting
Wow.
kindergarten.
Whoa.
And
Because yes, this happened during
um,
the summer months.
yeah,
Yeah.
so this happened at the end of July. And
Mhm.
then within weeks, he has to go to school for the first time. And then he had to do it alone.
In dealing with all of this, you're learning the basics from this RCMP officer you're texting, calling with. Now we're 5-ish years later, and you, Eric, and Sia's story is known for something altogether different, which is like a quest for justice, accountability, answers. When does that start? At what point is it that you say, this isn't a simple accident of some guy mowing his tall grass field and killing my daughter? Like when does it change for you, and what leads to that change?
So I think, you know, I think it was probably, within, a month later or so. And, um, you're just have such little detail. So, I mean, such little information.
Mm-hmm.
And the things he was saying, then like the more I would ask, it just didn't add up that this could happen, and that there are no charges filed, that there's no police report that I can see. And then, again,
It kind of seems like it was all very casual, like as far
yeah,
as
yeah,
how it's handled on this end,
yes,
the
it was,
investigation
yes,
kind of end versus what you're dealing with.
yes. And so the conversations were, like I said, relatively casual, and just like, oh geez, I'm a parent too, and I can only imagine, and that's it. And and everyone that I've spoken to, you get that, and which is now you realize is the most disingenuous,
Mm-hmm.
because they're stabbing you in the back and disrespecting your child the whole time,
But
but
softening it
being
as they do it.
yes, being so incredibly polite about it,
Mm.
and all the while doing all they can to protect your child's killer when there's every justification for charges to be filed, and not a single officer to have the fortitude, the character, the decency, the morality to say, you know what? I know that little girl who was brutally killed was not an accident, and we did not investigate. We didn't do our due diligence, and there is justification for charges being filed. And anyone who's even aware of it and has an opportunity to do something is culpable in letting a child killer go free. And so basically, as the conversations keep going, and then I want a police report, and I just want to read the information for myself because it's not adding up. And I just start thinking more and more, Sia was a smart little girl, and yes, she was, like most children, adventurous and curious, and would play in the backyard with a dog, but she wasn't the child who isn't going on a school field trip because she can't contain herself and run into a parking lot, or there's never anything to suggest that Sia didn't have the cognitive ability, the reasonable self-control that a 7-year-old would have, that she wouldn't recognize the danger and stay away from it. And they said, so there was nothing in our lives. They said there were certain things that you're like, oh, I could see my child doing this, this, or this. But I said, we've traveled with our children. We were in Greece for weeks in a village. And I just know my child. And like I said, there are certain things that you could picture them doing, and other things that no, I could not picture Sia running away from anything familiar and then hiding in a field where there is heavy machinery. And so it didn't add up. And so and the fact that, again, that they were just like, oh no, there are no charges filed and it's done, there's essentially nothing more to say. And then I have a cousin who's an attorney in Canada. So I asked again, because here you can easily get police reports. You can get mugshots. And apparently that's not the case there. And so he, on my behalf, was trying to get a police report. And then it was, I'm looking at actually a timeline that we had written out. So it was November so I think my final communication with Terry Miller was in October. And so then November 2nd, then my cousin requests a police report. And then finally in February, they send us, it was 4 pages of the police report, of minimal information.
Oh, yeah.
And 4 pages of the report, along with public newspaper articles. That then it was clear that it was, again, like, you're not going to give me, I had one lawyer who said, and we're like, this is what.
It sounds like someone broke into your car, a 4-page police report.
Yeah.
Broke into a car and there was a witness. There's 4 pages.
Exactly. So 4 pages of the police report, which was, there was more to get, but this is all they sent me.
Yeah, of course.
And the public newspaper articles. And so I think, like I said, the journalist wrote, the mother said it was like getting a middle finger in the mail. And I'm like, which is what? No. I said, for one thing, I didn't get it in the mail. And I wouldn't say it was them saying, fuck you, we're not going to give you any information. I never said it was a middle finger in the mail. That's just weird. So they emailed it. And it was, I said, minimal information, which was clear. And so this was a runaround to even get that, where it was like, oh, no, so-and-so is going to handle that. No, so-and-so is going to handle that. All of these starts and stops. And again, this is a child's death. And you're acting like it's like some state secrets. So February 8th, we get that. And then I start to feel even more suspicious of what is going on.
Yeah, and we're almost a year out now, where you get a 4-page police report and printouts of some articles.
Yes.
Wow.
And so then in March, then I start talking to different attorneys, figuring like, what can I do? Again, because this isn't my country. I don't know what to do. And so it seemed to be the quickest way. So in talking to US attorneys and Canadian attorneys, what I want is a police report. At this point, your wheels aren't turning in, like said, legality. You're still barely getting up every day. And so it seemed the quickest way to get a police report was to file a civil suit against Potter and Morgan Van Wyck and Doug Reach. So Doug Reach is the stepfather, Morgan Van Wyck is the stepmother, mother.
Sia's grandmother.
Yeah. So filing a civil suit against the two of them, two parties, suing their insurance.
Okay.
Go ahead.
In the point of this, just so I get the strategy, isn't so much because you want to sue these people, but by suing them, it opens up the doors to the information flowing to you.
Exactly. So you have to have, what my understanding was, again, there were many different legal options. And I remember one attorney's like, well, you can sue the manufacturer of the tractor to say it was unsafe. I said, I don't want that. I need a police report. I need to know what happened. I don't even know that this wasn't an accident. All I know is this doesn't sound right. And all I know is already the RCMP seems to be closing ranks and keeping information, and it's cryptic, and I don't trust it. I want to see a police report. So the different avenues of, like I said, legal efforts weren't anything I was interested in. I said, I just need a police report. So it seemed like filing the civil suit against the two parties then creates again, like my attorney would have to say, but it was a court order to get the police report.
Yeah. Okay.
So so I do that, and that's right. So then we keep going around and around with the police until April. Finally they said, oh no, I can't give you the information because you're not the parent to my cousin. So this has gone on since November. So we submit with my signature, a consent to get the information, and then they never responded. And so then they just went dark and wouldn't provide any information. And
then you're in the position where you have to take legal strategy, I guess.
Exactly. And so then in April, get an attorney, April of 2018. And then December 19th of 2018, we get the complete police report. So a year and a half later.
Hello, listeners. Sorry to pull you out of the episode like this, but I want to take a moment and remind you of the benefits of a nighttime premium feed subscription. First of all, I release the episodes ad-free and 2 days early on the premium feed, which gives you the show quicker and a lot less painfully. Secondly, I maintain a full back catalog of nighttime episodes and countless hours of bonus content only on the premium feed, so to give you more of the show than any sane person would probably even want to listen to. And the third thing, premium feed subscribers who do so annually get a discounted rate and receive a free swag pack by mail. Who doesn't love mail? And lastly, but hopefully most importantly, the premium feed will fund the creation of the show. My mics, my laptop, the little lights on my desk, It's all paid for by the combined efforts of the Premium Feed subscribers. So if any of this sounds good to you, for about the price of a cup of coffee, you can go premium right now at patreon.com/nighttimepodcast. I want to thank you for considering it. Now, let's get back to the episode. This report, when you finally get it and go through all this headache and rigmarole, as an East Coaster would call it, to get this report, I'm assuming that this is when you realize stuff was not done right and the battle begins.
Exactly. And so then we went from the civil suit to hiring a criminal attorney. And the civil suit sort of smolders on again, because what we wanted was the police report. And so then it's smoldering on and, kind of in the background. And then that dragged on. So it was finally, when was that finalized? It was finalized October 2020. Wow. And all the parties were found liable. And the reason the negotiation, like all of it went on for so long, was that Morgan Van Wyck and Doug Reach had wanted a stipulation of the civil suit to be that I was not able to speak publicly about Sia.
That you were not able?
That I was not able to.
Oh.
Okay. And so I just said to my lawyer, I mean, you probably don't want to put this in, but I just said to my lawyer, figure out whatever legal way you want to tell them to go fuck themselves. So I said, I will say whatever I want about my daughter at any point in time. And because again, I didn't care about I said, the only reason like this even went on was because I wanted the police report and the insurance settlement, as minimal as it was. I was like, I don't want it. I don't want it in my account. I don't want to see it.
Yeah.
Like the idea of, I said, I don't even want it in my account to then donate it or do anything. I do not want it. And so then it was like lawyer to lawyer, and then moved on to the criminal attorney. And I said, I literally don't even want to see, I don't even want to talk about dollars. It makes me sick, but I was content for this to smolder on just to keep them having to answer for themselves. And so then that's sort of what happened. And so that's when the civil suit attorney listened to the audios and said that, this doesn't sound right. Like this sounds like a crime. And so then she referred me to James, who is
James
a criminal attorney. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And that was January 2019. And then he and Tom Martin began working on our behalf and Sia's behalf.
So the civil suit ends. You now have all of this information as a result of going through the process of the civil suit. The information you have points to it appearing to be criminal in nature, which leads you to get a criminal attorney and Tom Martin, who's a well-known investigator, former retired cop in Halifax. And that all happens at the point that you get James Giacomantonio and Tom Martin to join up with you. Did you say January of 2019?
January 2019.
Okay.
Yeah. Like I said, and again, and the reason like this went on was because without getting the police report, it was just my gut feeling, our gut feeling, like this isn't right. And the RCMP response to this does not seem right. What you're telling me about what my daughter did does not sound right. And, at this point I said, I don't know anything about this person. I don't know anything about farm equipment. I don't know anything about even the property. I've never seen it. But what you're suggesting that my daughter needed to do in order to get herself in a position where she would be killed, none of it made sense. And it came from asking the same question over and over and over, and not in a lucid strategic way, but just if anything, just grieving, I can't grasp what you're telling me. And so then the more I kept asking, then the more it just did not add up.
And we are talking now 5 years after Sia's death, 3 or 4 years after you began to pursue this as something you believe was criminal in nature. How much of your life and time are you dedicating now to pursuing this?
I mean, it's it's all of it in the way that all of you takes care of all your children and whatever it is that they need, so you can't really compartmentalize like, well, I devote this much time to this child, this much time to this child. It's always there. So so whether it's emailing US government officials, you emailing, like talking to the US State Department, it's talking to every agency I can find in the RCMP, and Eric's doing the same thing. So you're constantly, it's your constant life. And again, and that's why I've said that anyone who's lost a child would say that you would not do this if there was any shred to believe that this was merely an accident and there was no malice, and you could just grieve peacefully. I don't want to talk to people about the last moments of my daughter's life. I don't want that to be public. When we started the Facebook page, it was in order to get public support, because clearly under the blanket of privacy, the RCMP chose to not investigate. So the Facebook page was in hopes of that there would be anybody who would either have some influence, or even maybe someone in the RCMP who says, like, what, I see that little girl's face and I see the grief from her parents, and what we did wasn't right. Like, is there one person, or even, their spouse or their teenage child who has Facebook, that's like, did you have anything to do with this? And hopefully compel even one person to do what's right. And but the first day of that Facebook page, again, like having to see his picture, and it just feels like you're just violating our own privacy. And I can't stand it. And
the Facebook group you're referring to, it's Justice for Sia is the Facebook group, and it's like you and she have supporters from all over the world in that group. What role does that group play today in in what you're doing? I understand the idea that initially it would have been started to bring people in and let people know what's happening, but it's still very active today. What role does that play?
And so, like I said, the role really, like I said, they're people, will say, like, there's people who are very cruel and say very nasty things. There are other people who are very supportive and give ideas of what can be done. And but it was really, like I said, just to help support getting her case reopened. And that's all that we've been asking. I said that a fair trial, a hearing, a review of the facts, and
literally anything, because it's the investigation opened and closed, and I'm using air quotes for investigation, within a matter of, it seems like in a matter of weeks from her death. Has there been any, like, is the movement now is you want it reopened, a full investigation start to finish? Am I getting that right? That's what you're fighting for?
Absolutely. And like I said, with the private investigation, the work was already done. The work is already done. And the investigation was complete. And it very well could have, at the end of that investigation, the private investigator could have said, I hate to tell you, but, even though this was awful, it's not illegal to be, callous about killing a child. But there's no crime. Like, his actions were not a crime. And again, like I said, it's not about whether or not we cannot accept that our daughter was killed, and that like, for instance, like Potter's wife during one of those hearings said that Eric isn't over his little child yet, and now he wants a piece of my husband.
Okay.
And that's what she said during the trial.
All right.
He's not over his little child yet, and now he wants a piece of my husband. And
you mentioned a quote as well, that Potter, the man driving the tractor, was quoted as referring to Sia as the thing in the field.
Correct. I didn't hear it myself. That's what I was told in an interview. That's what he said.
Wow.
And again, none of those things are illegal. And it's not illegal to be a grotesque asshole and a monster and callous and but the actions related to what he admitted to, what was determined, there are multiple actions that equal chargeable offenses. And that is the part that I find astounding, is that this isn't whether or not there's regret or that it, and again, like I said, that you just want to make someone else suffer because you've suffered. It's not that. Again, it's had the private investigator come back and said it is there, and the criminal attorney said there's not a crime here. It was horrific, but the actions do not equate a crime, or at least what we can prove. And then, there's nothing that you can do. I mean, at the most, then you fault the RCMP for their lack of investigation, lack of transparency. But there was a crime, and the RCMP were provided the private investigation. They were provided the legal opinion of each action and the chargeable offense associated with the action. And they, without giving an explanation, are refusing to open the case and reopen the case and charge. And he continues on in this manner and gets away with it every time.
I want to thank you for joining Effie and I in our conversation. I don't know how you feel about it, but as a father of young kids myself, hearing this story from Effie is just unimaginable. My heart breaks for her family, and I firmly believe that anything less than the most careful and considered investigation into Sia's death is just disturbing. And as you probably know at this point, Sia certainly didn't get the investigation she deserved. And as this series progresses, it will become increasingly clear. In the next episode, we're going to learn a lot more about what happened to Sia in Nova Scotia, as we're going to be joined by her father, Eric. In that talk, which will be released shortly, Eric gives us a heartbreaking look at every parent's worst nightmare.
She's like, I have something very serious to tell you. And then she said the words, there's been an accident. And as soon as she said that, I said, where's Sia? And I ran downstairs and I run out the door. There's a fucking ambulance there. And people and my daughter on a stretcher, moaning and bleeding, huge gash on the side of her head. I just started screaming, no.
And with that, I'm going to wrap up this episode, but before we part, let me give thanks. First, a big thanks to Effie for sharing her family's tragedy with us. I can only hope her doing so will put more advocates in Sia's corner. Next, a shout out to LJ from Dystopian Simulation, who provides the intro and outro voiceovers for this show, as well as Monty Datta, who provides the show's score. And lastly, but most importantly, I have a massive thank you to everyone who listens to Nighttime, as without your interest and your support, this show would be as pointless as it would be impossible. And on the topic of support, let me thank the newest subscribers to the premium feed. Canada's best fashion designer, Emma W., Emma C., Denver, and SJ. Thank you all for going premium. And for anyone else who'd like to support the show, you can access the premium feed at patreon.com/nighttimepodcast, or you can share this episode on social media and let some like-minded friends know what we're doing here. If anyone has any story ideas or wants to give feedback on the show, you can reach me at nighttimepodcast.com, and I'd love to hear your take on Sia's case. You can send me a voice memo also at nighttimepodcast.com. So until next time, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and let me know if you see anything weird.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte.